Welcome back to In Depth with Academia. I'm Richard Price, founder and CEO of Academia EDU, and as always, your host and guide through the world of cutting-edge research. Today, we're digging into a philosophical journey that's surprisingly practical, actually. Our focus is on a paper by Jacob Cleophas de Fonziku. Yeah, remember that name. It's a challenging but fascinating piece called Réflexivité théologique dans l'hermeneutic de Gadamer, or in English, something like Theological reflexivity in Gadamer's hermeneutics. As always, I'm just presenting the paper. This isn't an endorsement. I'm only sharing what's in there so you can explore and decide for yourself. First, let's figure out what's the core question here. Why did Nziku zoom in on the intersection between theology, subjectivity, and Gadamer's theory of interpretation? It all comes down to, well, how we understand meaning, how we interpret texts, traditions, even the past itself. Nziku asks, what happens when Hans-Georg Gadamer, a German philosopher known for his work on hermeneutics, brings in ideas, methods, and attitudes from his encounters with Christianity, especially Protestantism, into philosophy? Why does it matter whether subjectivity, even religious feeling, colors our pursuit of truth? Is objectivity really possible? Or wait, should we even want it? All right, let's dive deeper. Gadamer is famous for claiming that when we interpret anything, a book, a law, a historical event, we aren't cold machines. Instead, our backgrounds, experiences, and yes, our beliefs color our perspectives. According to Nziku, Gadamer was shaped by his proximity, maybe not having a direct passionate faith, but definitely familiarity with Protestant piety and theologians. Gadamer's theory, says Nziku, relies on what he calls theological reflexivity, which means, well, basically being aware of our own historical and subjective position while we interpret. And honestly, who hasn't caught themselves reading meaning into something because of their own mood or upbringing? I know I have. The paper's key argument is that Gadamer's way of interpreting, his hermeneutics, owes a ton to models from theology. Rather than refusing to acknowledge religious influences, Gadamer embraces the idea that there's no such thing as totally innocent, neutral understanding. Nziku's big insight is this: by bringing reflexivity from theology, being aware of our involvement, our responses, into philosophy, Gadamer shakes up the idea that research can never truly be purely objective, especially in the humanities. He's pushing back against positivism. That's the idea that science can be strictly methodical and value-free for those keeping score at home. So, how does Nziku back all this up? Like, what methods are being used here? It's mostly a close analysis of Gadamer's writings and of his social and intellectual context. Nziku shows how Gadamer's interactions with religious thinkers like Bultmann, a theologian, and his background with pietism kind of seep into his philosophical approach. The hermeneutical circle, where understanding is always shaped by previous understanding, gets a theological twist. For example, just as in some religious traditions, the message of a sacred text is always addressed personally to the reader, Gadamer thinks all texts have to be appropriated, made one's own, by the interpreter. Understanding is always an event between you and the tradition, the text, or the law. It's never just mechanical decoding. Does that idea resonate with your own experience, or does it feel a bit soft? Honestly, sometimes I wonder what an AI would make of all this. Oh, quick digression. I always find it fascinating how, when you go deep into philosophy, you end up right back at questions your grandparents might ask at the dinner table, like, is there really such a thing as objectivity? Anyway, moving on, back to the paper. Why does all this matter for you, the listener? Well, Nziku's argument challenges us to recognize that when we read, interpret, and even research, we bring our whole selves to the process, even our inherited traditions. It means you can't really understand, say, Shakespeare or even the law by just reading it with a scientific checklist. You have to, in a sense, let it speak to you and admit your own preconceptions. For teachers, students, or just everyday thinkers, this paper suggests that genuine understanding demands humility about where we're coming from, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of openness to transformation. But, and I need to repeat, this isn't handed down as some absolute truth. Nziku's analysis is one interpretation, and Gadamer's perspective is just that, a perspective. Academic research invites you to question, test, and reflect. Don't accept anything uncritically. That's the fun and the responsibility of engaging with ideas. So, summing up, Jacob Cleophas, Defo Nziku's paper spotlights how Gadamer blends philosophical and theological traditions to urge reflexivity, awareness of one's own position in the search for meaning. It's a powerful reminder that research isn't neutral and understanding is never entirely objective. Could this lead to richer, fairer interpretations, or does it risk too much subjectivity? That's up to you. Thanks for joining me on In Depth with Academia. Check out the paper if you're curious. Grapple, reflect, disagree. As always, I'm Richard Price, here to present the research, not to endorse it. And remember, academia is an ongoing conversation. So stay curious, stay humble, and see you next time.